and Vugu Nayosi, Black Revolutionary Now. Just wanted to bring you this video on Canada Day and the celebration of these Canadians celebrating a day just like they do the 4th of July, barbecuing, drinking, fireworks, what white people do. And a lot of people think that when they look at Canada and they view Canada is this liberal place, and the people is so polite, and we have nice people over here, which is actually they're talking about white people when they're promoting Canada. Yes, we might see some brochures for tourism, and you might see black people and the Indian here or Asian person here mixing with some white people. But how they promote it is white, just like they do America. But a lot of people don't know the dark, racist, genocide history that Canada have. And white people are also surprised, because the white people who came to Canada is the same white people who came to America. So white people might have a Canadian accent now, and white people might have a so-called, what is talk about, Yankee accent or American accent today. But these are the same people, just went to a different part of North America and genocide millions of people so they could settle on this land. There's so much of videos of when you look at the Aboriginal people, of what the Canadian government and some Canadian prime minister did to the Aboriginal people, including John A. MacDonald, who is on the $10 bill. Well, who was. So they have a black sister, a black Canadian, now on a Canadian dollar bill. But when you look at the old $10 bill, you will still see John A. MacDonald. And slowly they're trying to wipe him out of emoluments and the money, buildings, roads, schools, and stuff like that, because a lot of his history from dealing with the Aboriginal people specifically have come to surface, or people have went to dig up a lot of his skeleton inside of his closet, and we see who this person was, John A. MacDonald. But I want you to check this video on what white missionaries and the Catholic Church and Canadians used to do to Aboriginal children, like specifically. And there's tons of videos out now. You could go on YouTube. I'm gonna put a link in the description for another video highlighting the genocide and the dark secret of Canada. So while people is celebrating Canada Day, they don't even know the dark, racist, demonic history of Canada from the beginning. So check out this video and we'll come back and discuss.
Cultural genocide. What comes to your mind when you hear these two words? I'm sure most of you would think of Nazi Germany and the Jews, or China and the Uyghurs, or Myanmar and the Rohingyas. What about Canada, the beacon of multiculturalism? Why don't we ever think of Canada? This is a country where a cultural genocide of indigenous population went on till the 1990s, where indigenous children were separated from their families and subjected to forced assimilation at residential schools. Do you know how many children died in this genocide? 6,000. What's the proof, you may ask? And we will tell you about mass graves that continue to be unearthed to this day. The latest case is from British Columbia, where the remains of 215 children have been discovered buried on the grounds of a former indigenous school. 215 children, some of them as young as 3 years old. It's a heartbreaking discovery and a grim reminder of Canada's shameful history. Who were these children? Who operated the school? And where does the accountability lie? With the Canadian government or the Catholic Church? Our next report explores.
This is the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. On the exterior, it looks like any other school. But it operated like a re-education camp for Indigenous children. The horrors that unfolded within its walls have been documented in several reports. The first proof has emerged 4 decades later. The remains of 215 children have been found buried on the school's grounds. They were discovered with the help of a ground-penetrating radar device. The discovery has confirmed that the school was the site of a cultural genocide. Authorities say more bodies may be found in the days to come.
What I've heard from many of them is the fact that, the ones that they know were missing and never came back, were told that they ran away. So that still haunts. And, a lot of those triggers have popped up with this year find of 215 children.
Tributes are pouring in at the school's gates. Mourners are holding vigils in the honor of the dead. They say Canada must excavate Indigenous schools across the country to discover the extent of the trauma and to give closure to the families who were told that their children had run away.
Certainly no surprise at all. Everybody in the First Nations community knew that there were mass graves. We've been calling it for years. We've been telling the government for years that there are mass graves in every single residential school, but they didn't listen to us.
Back in Canada's capital, Ottawa, all flags on federal buildings are flying at half-mast, including the Peace Tower flag above the Canadian Parliament. The Prime Minister of Canada says the news breaks his heart. He says the discovery is a painful reminder of Canada's dark history. But Canadian lawmakers say expressing remorse won't be enough. They want the government to pay damages to the families who had suffered. Kamloops was just one of the many state-funded Christian schools, operated jointly by the Canadian government and the Catholic Church. The job of these schools was to assimilate Indigenous children by converting them to Christianity and not allowing them to speak native languages. This was often done through verbal and physical abuse. An inquiry commission report into the matter found that 150,000 Aboriginal children were separated from their families, and nearly 6,000 children were killed in this cultural genocide. In 2008, the Canadian government apologized in Parliament for these crimes.
Infamously said to kill the Indian in the child. Today we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong, has caused great harm, and has no place in our country.
Then, in 2018, the Catholic Church was asked for a formal apology, but the request was rejected by Pope Francis himself, who worried that an apology may invite potential damages too. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
So, as you can see, this is just a bit of history of the ugly, wicked, brutal history of Canada. And I only highlight this because this is a contrast to what happened to African Black people and what is still happening to African Black people worldwide. And once you look at a common denominator, you always see the white man. So when you look around the world of different cultures and different groups of people, who is responsible for their genocide? Who is responsible for leaving the residue of disease and sickness and behavior and their culture into different countries when they leave? We will see the white man. Some people just don't like to hear the truth, but somebody have to say. Most people is very comfortable with lies, but they're very uncomfortable with the truth. I want people to be uncomfortable with the truth, because that's how you expose these people. That's how you expose what's going on in government and what these people have been doing for decades, for centuries. So I just wanted to bring you that video, to give you just a little bit of highlight of what Canada history is all about. So when people look at Canada and how they promote Canada, on the tourist brochures and commercial and all kind of stuff, but they fail to tell you that because they are embarrassed and they want to have their country look like they never did anything in history, and they're so nice people. Just remember, slavery ended in Canada, I think around 1840, right, or something like that. When you look in the city of Toronto, they had basements still existed today of brutal torture chambers. One of the famous streets in Toronto, one of them, Dundas, who was a white supremacist, who was a racist. I think they changed his name from the street whatever to something, I can't remember. I think is I want to say Sankofa or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but this is what is being exposed today. And we see people celebrating Canada Day today, and they're drinking and having fun and doing fireworks or whatever, and this will perpetuate itself for years to come. And most people don't want to go and find out the truth and find out the ugly history of Canada. And Vugu Nayosi, Black Revolutionary Now.